Hi, thank you so much, Tina. My name is Amber Haskew, as she said, the Director of Public Policy for Liberty Council Action. And in my spare time, I have either volunteered or worked or led about 100 different political campaigns across the United States. And one of the things that I love about them is you kind of start to scratch from scratch and get an entire movement going and off the ground in just a matter of months. And I would just want to share some of the different procedures, ideas, so that you can take those and move forward with what's best in your community. Some of the ideas that I think these will be best for is if you want to have like a school district, an impact within your school district, or maybe a county party of your favorite party and kind of get organized through there, or potentially doing counseling, scheduling counseling consistently at a local abortion clinic, or starting a weekly prayer group. These ideas are for starting a movement from scratch when there's really nothing to build from prior to God just laying this on your heart. So there's a really big difference between activism, lobbying, and organizations. The activism is when you are speaking in your own voice, you're advocating for what you personally want or need or see. With lobbying, that's more of you speaking on behalf of somebody else. And then the third one that I really want to focus on today is that organization where you empower others to be a strong voice and together focusing on the goal that you have. So when that organization is formed and then year over year builds and deepens those relationships, the influence that it can have is just so powerful. One of the things I really want to encourage you is just a moment of caution before we go down this path of asking genuinely, is there a need for an organization? And I've seen individuals just kind of like get new on the scene politically, and they're excited and they're passionate, and maybe an older organization has hit some roadblocks or is experiencing some volunteer attrition, and rather than truly researching and saying, is there a need for this organization, they just start and launch. And then you have two organizations that are competing for volunteers and donations and competing messages, and really confusing the issue in the minds of people and decision makers. So just want to like really strongly caution you, sit down and ask, is there any organization that this could be run through, that this is already working on? And maybe they're not as effective as you would like for them to be. But in those cases, just humbly go to them and say, this is my vision. I think it aligns with yours. Is there any way that we can work together? And rather than fighting against them or having to point out why donors should give to your organization and how their organization isn't doing as good a job as yours is, you can really just come humbly and have that synergy, that energy, and that working together. One of the things why that is so important is, as a rule of thumb, I think it takes about 3 people to really get an organization off the ground. And it's not until you get that 4th person that you're actually able to start making a significant impact. You need your president or chairman, you need your treasurer who's going to deal with money, you need your secretary who's going to deal with lists and organizations and details and notes, and your president normally deals with vision and, frankly, everything else. So I've been in situations where somebody just started an organization because they wanted to have president at the end of their name. And part of that is because they think, oh, if I'm president, nobody's going to tell me what to do. The reality of local small groups is that when you're in charge, everybody tells you what to do. Everybody has an opinion on how you should be doing your job better. So others have alluded to the fact that you just need to have those pure motives. You need to leave your ego at the door. Repeatedly, one of the biggest compliments I have to keep reminding myself of is that if I've done something right and somebody else comes in and takes the credit for it, that means that they wish they had done the work that I had done. And just to see that as a compliment. So do not try to get a whole community organization launched if you're by yourself. It leads to burnout on one side or to um, increasingly shrill tones and messages because you feel alone. So I would recommend create an elevator pitch. If something is just really on your heart, I've got to start this organization, get a 2 sentence elevator pitch. And when you go to a waiter or waitress at a restaurant or a cashier at a gas station, just people that you're very casually interacting with, and they say, "How are you doing?" You say, "You know what? I'm really excited about," and insert your two sentence pitch, and just see what their reaction is. And some of them will be like, "Oh, that's interesting," and try to exit the conversation as quickly as possible. And that tells you you need to hone your pitch. You need to change how you're messaging on the details even before you launch your organization. If you can, in a sentence and a half, 2, 3 sentences, convince a cashier there's a problem and somebody should do something about it, that is when you're like, okay, if there's no other organization and I can get a random person that has no interest in my particular issue to see the need for change, that's when you start to have that foundation that's going to give you a lot of success. So, one of the things is understand your community. I've seen a lot of people come into a community if they want to do, let's just say, for example, a school board issue. If that's the case, know who's on your school board, know the territory, know which towns, where the lines are, so that when you bring your issues or your concerns, you can speak with authority to how things need to change, and you can help educate those that are around you. So also learn the language. I went down to Louisiana and they don't have counties, they have parishes. They don't have interstate exits, they have interchanges. And so I had to really focus on changing my language so that I wasn't sounding weird to them, even if it did sound weird to me. So when you're using their language, you're establishing credibility and you're building trust. The other thing I strongly recommend is to get a mentor. There are older people that share your concerns that just don't have the energy to fight anymore, but they are passionate about making sure that you don't fall into the pitfalls that they've seen other people experience. So if you can humbly go and ask them, "I'm interested in this. Can you please help me and make sure that I don't make stupid mistakes that make our side look bad?" That is really, really critical. Then if you are fully creating a organization from scratch, let's say a county party of your choice, you will need some kind of a structure or bylaws. I don't like bylaws because I've seen organizations spend like a month hashing out bylaws and not focusing on the vision of accomplishing things. Now, I think that's just the personality that God has given me and my desire to do and to accomplish. Bylaws are important, but you can just copy and paste them from a different county or a different organization. You do not need to start them from scratch. Please make sure you get permission from anybody that you're doing that. But it's, in a way, it's a compliment to them. Say, "Hey, your bylaws are really great. Do you mind if we use them as a template for our organization?" And just emphasize gratefulness for what they have done. So once you have that vision, you have that need, we need to establish communication so that if there's an event, say again, school board, if there's a school board meeting, we're going to be talking about drag in the libraries or books or different things that are within your sphere of influence. You want to have a way that you can get your people activated. So decide on a method of communication that's best for your community. Some communities, it's going to be a text message group. Other communities, it's going to be email based. Do not do the method of communication that's easiest for you. Do the method that's easiest for them to get the message, to receive that message. Then, it can be everything from email, text messages, a phone tree, a Facebook group. Sometimes there's Telegram groups. Sometimes it's even an old fashioned, like a bulletin board. So don't be afraid to think out of the box of how you can get your message out to people quickly, cheaply, and effectively. Then the next thing is, how do you build your list? And this is one of the things that's kind of exciting, because if you know where to look, you can build a list very quickly. One thing is, if there's major events, sports events, kids events, different things like that, you can stand outside of those events and you got your pitch already honed, and have a clipboard or three, depending on the size of your community, and just say, we're concerned about this issue and we'd like to be able to communicate to others that also share our concerns. Would you like to be on our email list? And just go ahead and grab that information. You will be encouraged if you can go to events that most closely align with your viewpoint. So say we got a really good response when we went to a gun show, when we were in the middle of a Second Amendment issue inside of our city. Secondly, when there are news cycles and issues that are related to your core principles, that can be really helpful. Normally at a city council meeting, there's 20 people that would show up. Well, the city council decided they wanted to ban guns of certain types, and we had well over 1,000 people show up. And so we were just circulating throughout that event, grabbing information, getting information, connecting with people, asking them their concerns, making sure that they felt heard. So also another way you can get visibility by parades. A third way is through speaking engagements. If there is a sister organization or somewhere where you think your volunteers, donors, and advocates would be a high concentration of them, then go ahead and say, hey, could I spend a couple weeks volunteering to help you? And then could I get 2 or 3 minutes of speaking time during your event? Some people will say yes, some people will say no. A secondary counter offer, if they say no, is, can you just point me out with my title, my organization, and recognize me during the event? And that gives people that want to talk with you or share your vision and concerns, they can come to you and start to build that networking capability. Then the other thing is, like, for example, we had a voting event, and so I just stood outside in the hot sun and I gave my 2-sentence pitch, and as people were leaving voting, I would sign them up for a specific get out the vote effort that I was working on. So I got a nice sunburn and a huge list all at the same time. And so there's just very creative ways to think. Go where the people are and offer them an opportunity to make a really big difference. Specifically, if you are looking at starting a local politically related organization, the best gold that you can find for starting a list is to go to past or recently retired legislators, city council members, those specific, and go slow. Don't just show up and be like, give me all of your list and contacts and everything like that, because that's going to creep them out. But if you go in there and learn their concerns, learn their issues, learn what they would like to see changed in your community, and see if you can align their concerns with the vision that you have moving forward, and say, is there any way you would be willing to share your list with yourself? That can give you a huge jump start going forward. So once you have that, there's kind of this idea that you create a list, and that list becomes a certain number of people that are going to show up at events. For example, individuals that show up at your events, there's going to be a smaller number that are going to say, yeah, I'll go volunteer in some capacity, be that give testimony or go door to door, make a phone call, do sidewalk counseling, whatever your volunteer activities is. And then from that, you're going to get an even smaller segment that has the skills and the heart to be your core leadership. And so the whole point of building contacts, building visibility in the community is to start bringing people in and sorting them into that excuse me, specialized leadership role. When you're building an organization, knowing your volunteers is absolutely critically essential. When I would get a email pinging in saying somebody had filled out our volunteer form, I would try to get in touch with them within 24 hours. I had at one point an 18-hour turnaround time, and the person said, "Oh, you took so long to get back to me that I volunteered for a different organization." So understand that if somebody's volunteering, it can be a really, really quick turnaround time that you need to show interest in their willingness to help you. Then I would schedule a phone call with them, and we started out very small. One organization that I built up, it was about 2.5 volunteers. And so if somebody reached out and said they wanted to volunteer, it was like this little celebration, and I'd reach out to them. And I would spend between a half hour and 45 minutes just learning about that person. Are they introverted? Are they extroverted? Do they want to do something that's similar to their job skill set, or are they tired of that and they want change and creativity, and they want to do something completely different from their job set? And for me, I just kind of keep all that information in my head so that when I have a need, it pops out. I'm like, oh, Susie and Tim and Jane have the skill set and the interest and the flexibility to be able to handle this need. If you want, you can take notes on a little recipe card and write down names of pets, flexibility and different things like that. And just keep them in like a recipe box. Other people love to keep that kind of information on an Excel spreadsheet. Anything, those are all basically free options. And I love the fact that if you step out of your leadership role, it's something that you can hand to the people that are coming in so that they don't have to restart over from scratch, and they can continue your work if, heaven forbid, you get in a car accident or need to move for some reason. So then understand that there should be a life cycle of a volunteer. If your vision is clearly stated and they adhere to that they should be retained as volunteers year over year at about a rate of 85% if you're doing your job well, if you're not burning them out, overburdening them, or doing something else that's causing. So if you're not able to be right around the 85% retention rate, you need to do a survey or an exit conversation and ask them, how can we do better? What did we do wrong? You're going to have some attrition just from people that they change types of jobs, or they move out of the area, or sometimes they pass away. So there is some automatic attrition. Then one of the things that is, I think, really fun is taking somebody that looks at me and says, "Oh, I could never do X, fill in the blank. I could never go door to door. I could never make cold call phone calls," and help expose them to it, make it less scary, and get them to the point where they can go be with somebody else that's doing it, and grow them into the type of person that can do it by themselves and then train others. And that's just the progression that I see with volunteers. Sometimes you would have people be like, "I couldn't go door to door, but I can make brownies for people that are willing to go door to door." And so just bringing people into the office, making them familiar with what's going on. They come in to drop off the brownies. They hear people making phone calls. It makes it much less scary when they see other people doing that process. Then, so that's just kind of this power of come with me. If somebody's scared, I'll be like, "Hey, I'm going to go door to door. Do you want to just come with me? Can you, there's a lot of literature that I'm holding. Can you hold some of this literature?" So that I like to talk with my hands, as you guys have probably noticed. And that way I can be more free to have a conversation that's natural with me. Well, after they see me do 5, 10, 15 doors, they're like, "I think I can go out on my own." And then we divide and conquer. And the really exciting part is when they can then take that skill set and they tell somebody else, "Come with me." And you start that multiplication of skills and volunteers. So I just want to caution you that some of the most common pitfalls with mistreating volunteers is when you're trying to get an organization off the ground, you commonly have like these volunteer roles that are just like, flashing red problems in your mind. I need somebody to do this thing right here. And when a volunteer comes in, you want to shove that volunteer into the need that you have, whether they fit it or not. And I really want to caution you against that. If you want to retain volunteers long term, you need to put them into the role that they want and suits them so that they feel successful, rather than necessarily into the most urgent need in your mind. And you will get maybe 5% of your volunteers are what I call a top tier volunteer. And I would say for an election day, I would not schedule them at a specific time. I'm like, you're my emergency staff. I need you available to go whenever, wherever, do whatever. And we would usually see about 5% leading up to an election day just fall out. I can't do it the night before. A kid got sick. Nobody can watch it. I can't help. So you need to, in some ways, if possible, overstaff your volunteers so that when that happens, you don't have a panic, something's not being covered. The other thing I commonly see, another pitfall, is that individuals will shove volunteers into their least favorite position. And then the president will try to do, well, this is what I like to do, and so I'm going to do this job. And it's just going back to what we talked about, that servant leadership of let other people have the positions that they want, and then you as that leader take that responsibility to fill in whatever roles you couldn't find somebody else to help with. And even if it's the role of cleaning the bathroom or taking out the trash, serve in a way that makes the organization run with an idea to your volunteers being happy long term. So the other thing that's next is I always attempt to volunteer first. I never ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do and I haven't had experience doing. And the value of that is if I'm asking them to go door to door, when I'm describing that, when I'm setting the expectations initially, those expectations can closely match reality. So they don't show up and how I described it is completely different from what they're actually doing. So just have that, make that sacrifice, go spend a few hours to do what you are recruiting volunteers to do. And try to build as much as you can resources. I find volunteers can be, they can make really good choices, but they sometimes don't know how to make those choices. And so just like a volunteer tree, if you get into this situation, these are the questions. If you get into that situation, these are the questions. And especially for phone calls, having that decision tree can really reduce their stress of walking in, not knowing how to take care of things. So try to proceduralize so that if you're out sick, somebody else can grab what you normally do and step into your role, and they can then just start duplicating your efforts as much as possible. And instead of, at first it is very difficult because one person turns into two people, and two people then can turn into four, and four, then eight. And then it starts to get exciting because that turns into 16 and 32 if each person can just go out and get one more volunteer to help. So, and one of the really important keys I found is rather than starting every week new looking for volunteers, before that volunteer leaves, thank them profusely and then see if there's any time next week when they can come back and reschedule them for next week. Or even better is to try to get them on a weekly schedule where they come every day from 3 to 6 o'clock on Mondays. And that way you just have that consistent rotating schedule, and that takes so much pressure off of a volunteer recruiter. Another thing you can do is to reach out and try to get in-kind donations. So see if a restaurant will donate food, see if a real estate owner can donate a corner of office space, or if a gas station owner can donate gift cards. And that way you can tap into maybe the busier people, the business owners that aren't going to come and just volunteer for hours and hours like individuals from the retired community would be able to, but you can still get buy-in and involvement. And when people can invest in your organization, then they feel invested. And it doesn't matter if it's money or time, that investment makes them want to see you succeed. And if you can start out small and just kind of build that relationship, build that we're in this together, how do we make this work? You can really see people sacrifice so much for that goal that you guys share. As far as retaining volunteers, it's really important to keep them from feeling isolated or alone. I really appreciate bringing volunteers together before they go out to door knock or go out to advocate for life on a sidewalk, or that way we can, just kind of make sure that they know they're part of a team. They're not in this alone. One of the things that I would have the privilege of doing is I worked with Generation Joshua. And so we would take kids that were ages 14 to 18. And that last week of an election, we would train mostly homeschool kids to go door to door, to make phone calls, that sort of thing. And it was so much fun to see these young kids. I had some that were as young as 11, and they would come from homeschool families just being incredibly shy and a little bit awkward, not at all comfortable speaking with adults in a public situation and asking them for something, and just mentoring them through that process, giving them the tools that they need. And at the end of it, just see them come alive and, hi, my name is Jane and I can't vote yet, but I want you to vote because this is such an important election and I'm going to have to be the one that pays for this. And what I loved so much about that is it's not 1 week. That is a skill that those kids will take for the rest of their lives. And your even adult volunteers, that ability to articulate and communicate and speak up for what they believe in is so powerful. And so recognize you're not just training volunteers for you, you're training the volunteers for them to be a mouthpiece going forward. So at the end of our events, we would turn around and we would have the kids all come together and share the best stories, the crazy stories. And one of the things I really liked about that is, rather than the kids being scared about an interaction that was maybe a little bit more explosive than they were counting on, they would look at me and smile and be like, Miss Amber, I got the best story for tonight. And it was amazing to me to see how that transition changed from being shaken, being rattled, to, oh, I've got a good story to tell the group. And so just kind of keep that in mind for how to make your volunteers feel supported. And then it's really important, as you're gathering information, do not rely on other people to contact you to volunteer. You need to be the one to reach out to them and ask them, hey, we're doing an event on this day. Does that work? Oh, no, I'm busy that day. Okay. Well, is there any other day that works for you? We have Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday morning free. Do any of those times work? And just kind of role play through that until you're comfortable scheduling a time that's specifically good for them. So one other aspect I wanted to talk about is that volunteer titles can be your friend. Volunteer titles are absolutely completely free. And as long as they are accompanied with a very clear understanding of exactly what that comes with, it can be so powerful. I've seen people consistently do a little bit more work because they have a title that's completely free. So understand that you need to do that judiciously. Some people are terrified of titles, and if you offer them a title, they'll just like shake their head in terror and, oh, I don't want a title, I don't want to. But they will turn around without a title and do the exact same efforts that they didn't want the title for. So don't shove a title on everybody. Again, know your volunteers and be sympathetic to what they want. Some volunteers do so for recognition. They want an event, where they say so-and-so did the most phone calls. They did 2,000 phone calls this past, 3 weeks, or whatever the time frame is. They crave that recognition. Some people do it because they want to see a difference. Some people volunteer because they want community. They want a team of people that they can go out and know, and they're happy to see them when they show up. So understand the motivation behind your volunteers. And then oftentimes, and Abigail touched on this earlier, when you're in a community situation, you don't want to isolate people just because they have a different perspective from you on one issue. Because it could be you turn around and 2 weeks later, you have the same perspective on a different issue. And so I really encourage you, don't be afraid to talk to your opposition. And what I mean by that is to really genuinely listen to them. What are their concerns? What do they fear? Why are they working in opposition? Understand their concerns against you. And then in some ways you can find a common ground in an unusual way that you're like, oh, I thought your objections are over here, but they're over there, and we can agree on this. And then that is an easy win for you. Other times, you're just going to be completely, totally opposed. And in that case, you understand them better and how to answer the objections that they're going to bring. But what that does is it makes you seem less scary. And so it decreases the emotion that they have against you. And if you can find those common themes, hopefully you can unmotivate their volunteers. In war, the principle is the side that loses the fewest soldiers is the side that will win. And I think that principle applies same to political efforts, spiritual efforts, new organizations. If the opposition that you're fighting against loses more volunteers than you do, at the end of the day, Lord willing, you're going to be the one to prevail. And so with that, I just want to encourage you, it's okay to start small. We can just cherish those small beginnings, and even just showing up has a huge impact. There was one point when my dad was talking with a state legislator, and we're in a small state, and he said, wow, this is the most controversial topic of the entire year. I had 12 people talk to me about it. And my dad was like, I could get 12 people to talk to you about something. And so, especially when you're talking local, your ability to impact is so incredibly much bigger than if you get at a state level or federal or even global. And so I want to kind of just leave you with that hope that you have the power to make a difference. And it may not be on day one, it may not be on year one, but that's the whole point of putting together an organization that can encourage each other and to continue to build, continue to educate, and then impact. And so I just wanted to leave you with a choice that you can do nothing, or you can take these skills and impact your community with a strong voice for change. And the last resource I'll leave you with is a really powerful book. It's called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And it just kind of helps you walk through that process of honing your message in a way that can be understood and communicating that in a great way to others. And so with that, I will go ahead and turn it back over to Dina. Thank you very much.